Hi, I'm Josh Denbeaux. I've been a consumer attorney for a number of years, and I only represent consumers and people going through some trying times. And I've learned a lot over the last 12 years since 2008. And I think we're going to see some pain coming. I think everybody agrees with that. That's why I'm doing the webinar. I have a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and there's going to be so many people out there in financial and other pain with questions they need answered, and sometimes don't even know how to ask their questions. And I'm going to do a series of free posts, free webinars, so people can try to find out how best to protect themselves and their families in this difficult time. Next slide, please. All right, so I've been getting a lot of emails and calls on my cell phone from clients and former clients, and one from somebody represented 10 years ago. And I've encapsulated them down to basically the four questions, which is, what if things get worse? What if the economy goes into a recession? What if I lose my job or my business? And my advice was actually the fourth thing, which is hope for the best, prepare for the worst. But anybody can say that. The question is, what options do you have? What happens if, through no fault of your own, clearly no fault of your own, your finances are fixed, but your revenue drops so much that you can't meet all your bills? What are the options? And the causes for this, obviously, are that the disease gets worse, the economy goes into recession, and if you lose your job or your business, what happens next to you and to your employees? Okay, next slide, please. All right, so in a worst case scenario, what's going to happen is the creditor industry is going to be trying to make the money the way they make their money, which is chasing people down for cash. And it's going to be a very difficult time. The number one concern people have is housing. Credit cards, okay, that's concerning to me. Car loan, that's concerning to me. But my kids live in this building, and I don't know that I can keep making the payment. Josh, what do I do? What do I do? How do I protect my family in this uncertain world? And this is a question that's going to be faced by people who have been financially insecure off and on during their lives. And it's also going to be a question faced by people who have been lucky enough to work in careers that have paid them enough money they never actually had to deal with a creditor call. In some ways, maybe in a lot of ways, this new dynamic that we're in is going to be hardest for those people above anybody else. It's such a dramatic change in the lifestyle. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so before I talk about the potential moratorium, before I talk about what the government may or may not do, and by the way, since the time I wrote these slides, which was maybe 3 hours ago, there's been a lot of news, and it looks like both the federal government and the state of New Jersey are going to be putting out benefits to workers, individuals, employees, consumers. They're going to make a big difference. It looks like there is going to be a moratorium on mortgage payments. I don't know how we could keep that going for an extended period of time, but at least in the short term, it looks like there's going to be a moratorium on mortgage payments. But what happened? I've said that to somebody on the phone. Looks like there's going to be a moratorium on a mortgage payment. And he immediately said back to me, "Because that's not going to last forever." And I was working on Wall Street until 3 days ago, and that's not coming back. And I still got the mortgage, and I still got the cars, and what do I do? I don't have any great answers on individual questions here on this webinar. I used his example as an example as to questions and issues and fears that people have to talk about the bigger picture. I'm happy to continue to talk for free to people on an individual basis, not on a public webinar. But basically what's going to happen is if there is no more income to support the expenses, the creditor industry is going to start doing what they do, which is calling you, hassling you, being difficult with you, and eventually seeing how the court system is going to work for them and not for you. And if I am an expert in anything, and I think I'm an expert in a couple of things, I'm certainly an expert from the last 12 years in understanding how to use the court system, even in the situation where my client is being chased by a creditor or a debt collector, to my client's benefit and to their attorney's benefit, my benefit, and to the disadvantage of the creditor's attorney and the creditor. So next slide, please. And the status of the court system. From a very important perspective, from the 30,000-foot perspective, looking down on how we as an American society have decided how disputes are going to be resolved. The courts are supposed to be the arbiter for the disputes. Everybody understands that, but not too many times do people have an opportunity to sit back and say, well, I get it. I sort of understand. The courts are the glue to our society. Right now, courts are closed. They're closed Monday, they're closed Tuesday. They're going basically closed. They're going to be opening up slowly, but evictions aren't happening, foreclosures, sales aren't happening. We can't appear in court in person except very odd circumstances. There's going to be a lot of upheaval in the court system. That is going to inure, at least temporarily, to the benefit of folks who need some way to get a break on their monthly expenses. Eventually, if bills aren't paid, the creditor is going to pursue what they perceive to be their rights in a court filing. And from there, you're going to need to back them up on by putting an answer in and dealing with the litigation. But I think probably I'm going a little too far on an initial webinar. I think people are probably just in shell shock from the change, getting tired of, dealing with their kids 24/7, especially ones with younger kids, because that is so hard, so hard. Oh, teenagers, that's probably a lot of fun too. But look, the point is, the court system is going to be present in your life, in our lives, in a lot of good ways, some bad ways, but mostly in the good ways. We have a situation here where the consumer is going to be recognized as an innocent harmed party. And that is going to be a very new dynamic. It has to be taken advantage of, has to be understood and explained on each case. But this is a dynamic that's going to be true. I don't want to go in more detail because I think I can't without some feedback. And so maybe it'll be for the next webinar. Next slide, please. Student loans. I really understand almost every aspect of debt out there with the exception of student loans. I work with a firm called Dan Law run by Mark Dan, D-A-N-N. He's the former Attorney General of Ohio. He's a good friend of mine, and he and I do a lot of cases together. His firm handles a lot of student loan disputes. I don't do any of them. And there's evidently a webinar out on student loans and how to deal with repayment and everything having to do with coronavirus, and that's on the screen right now. So if that's something you need information about, I'm unfortunately not your guy, except for the fact that I just gave you who your guy is. So there you go. Next slide, please. All right, so I went through 7 slides, some pretty big topics real quick. I am available to answer questions. You can email me at jdenbeaux@denbeauxlaw.com. You can text me at 201-970-6534. We'll probably post that on the screen at some point, but that's my personal cell phone. If you want to reach me, I happily talk to people, but it is much preferable for me if you text me and say, hi, John Smith here, saw the webinar on YouTube or Facebook, and I have a question about X. Then we can go back and forth pretty quickly. I can narrow down the scope of things, and we can get on the phone, and it'll be a more profitable time for everybody. And profitable meaning it'll be more efficient for me to understand what your issue is, and quicker for both of us, and for me to get to your question, and also easier for me to properly understand your question and give you the information that you need. All right, everybody, stay safe, be calm. Do the best you can under the circumstances, and I'm just going to be loading the internet with a whole bunch of free information because there's going to be a lot of difficult times ahead, and we are all in this together. Later.